Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will be going over the history and geography of the central region of Ghana. I don't know why, but normally I draw at least a loose version of the borders of each region I talk about, but for some reason when I did Ghana I didn't, and I've just kept up that tradition, I suppose. I think it's because the first video I did on Ghana was on Accra, and I didn't need to draw borders, so then I just never have, but... So there's no borders for you, but it is essentially kind of like this area here-ish. We are along the coast here of the Gulf of Guinea, known historically as the Gold Coast. We'll talk about that during its history, with Cape Coast being the capital and largest city in this region. If you go further in, it gets much more forested, where you can see the Kakum National Park up here. Also important to note is the town of Elmina just next door, because we're going to be talking about these places in history. And let's get into it, because they are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Let me get tablet over here, and we'll read about them. We have the forts and castles, Volta, Greater Accra, and Central and Western regions. The remains of fortified trading posts erected between 1482 and 1786 can still be seen along the coast of Ghana between Keta and Beyin. They were links in the trade routes established by the Portuguese in many areas of the world during their era of great maritime exploration. We can see some pictures here of some of the old castles and forts, but we're going to look at them more on Google Earth. You can see that's Fort William right there. We'll look at that on Google Earth. The pictures here are okay, but the Google Earth ones are way better. But yeah, let's talk about that in its history. Of course, there's been people here for a very, very long time. The most dominant in the pre-European times would have been the Guan peoples. In the 14th century, the kingdom of Fetu ruled this area here. They would eventually incorporate Akan-speaking peoples as well into that kingdom. In the 17th century, that kingdom was absorbed into the Fonte Confederacy, which was a group of various powers here in southern Ghana who teamed up to try to defend themselves from the Ashanti, which we've already covered up here in Kumasi. They were definitely the most warlike, the most intense of Ghana's indigenous peoples. They're peoples to be reckoned with. Even the Europeans believed that and would war with them many times. But they never conquered this area along the coast. The Europeans would snatch that up before the Ashanti could. But let's talk about that. The Portuguese would have sailed along this coast in the mid 1400s as they explored this coastline of Africa, and they would establish Elmina Castle in 1482. Elmina Castle is the first building built by Europeans in Africa below the Sahara, because of course there were Roman settlements in Algeria, Tunisia, there's, Greeks in Egypt, such and such, all of that up there, Morocco, what have you. That doesn't count. So past that time in European history, this was the first European building in Africa, and still around for the most part. Obviously not in use, it's a museum now, but this was built to defend their trading posts because, as you can see, like we talked about, this area is called the Gold Coast, and that's because there is a lot of gold to be traded here in Ghana. And the Portuguese wanted to monopolize that. But of course, once the other European powers got wind of that, they started to construct their own castles and forts and things along the coast here to set up a gold trade. Here in what's now Cape Coast, the Dutch built their first fort in 1637. In 1655, the Swedish had taken it over and they expanded it to its biggest size. The British would take it in 1663. A lot of these places changed hands multiple times as European powers grappled for control of the gold trade at that time. It would later, of course, turn into the slave trade, which these castles that they're called weren't castles. There is no kings ruling from it or anything. They would become slave trading centers, and there's always a fort nearby to defend it. There were some very eerie places today in these castles where prisoners were held, and of course there would be, at least at Cape Coast and Elmina, I believe, the door of no return, where people were let out for the last time leaving Africa to board slave ships to be bought and sold like property across the Atlantic. Many people's ancestors came through those doors. It's depressing to talk about this. It's probably like one of the most depressing things in history, let's be real. But that being said, Cape Coast was the capital of the British Gold Coast until 1877, when it was moved over to Accra. Cape Coast was a pretty thriving, booming town on that gold and slave industry until that point. It really started to decline, especially in the 20th century. Of course, long after the slave trade ended, that also was a huge impact on the economy of this area. But in 1962, their harbor closed. You can see Tema over here is now the main harbor of Ghana. So this city and this area today really thrives on that historical tourism, but Cape Coast in particular today is known as an educational town with lots of universities, prestigious high schools, and lots of trade schools. So it's like the center of education here on the Ghanaian coast. In 2009, newly elected President of the US Barack Obama made his first international trip as president here to Cape Coast, where he toured the castle. I wonder if that's because maybe his ancestors once came through that door of no return. It's very eerie. But, yeah, he gave a speech there. Pretty big deal, you know, when a U.S. president makes their first trip. Where are they going to go? It's kind of indicative of how their administration's going to go. And I think that was pretty indicative of the Obama administration, to be honest. But in a nutshell, that is the history of the central region of Ghana. It's essentially a suburb of Accra, to be honest. It's everything on the outskirts of the capital. But it's still pretty neat to look at, and I found some cool stuff to look at on Google Earth other than the castles and forts. So why don't we hop over to the tablet and take a look at this area on Google Earth? Let's go. Here we are in the central region of Ghana. And let's start by zooming out so you can see exactly where we are in the world. Here is beautiful Ghana, the first country to achieve independence from a colonial power in Africa, and would really start that chain reaction throughout the rest of almost all of Africa. This is the Gulf of Guinea, you can see right there, and the various coastal powers along here, like Nigeria. You can see Benin and Togo just next door. Ivory Coast is over there. Abidjan we've already covered. And yeah, there's the Sahara. There's beautiful Africa. So let's start over in Cape Coast. And let's look at the castle. Actually, there's a better slideshow. If I zoom in really close and tap the museum's slideshow, here we go. This one's better. They got coffee there. can see that they're doing a museum tour. All the cannons pointing out. Wow, look at the fishing boats ready to go out to sea just outside the castle. Isn't that neat? A rocky shore, old rusty cannons. Yeah, we can see, ooh, an aerial shot of the castle. That's really neat. And there's the door of no return. Let me see. Interesting, the tour guide there. Old cannonballs. There's the door. He's got a fish. He's got a big fish. But let me see. Yeah, you can see in the quarters here where people were held and going through the door of no return. I don't know if you can see the sign there that says that. But the main slideshow for this castle doesn't have pictures of the door, and that's like the most famous part of this castle. So I wanted you to see that. But we can see some big wide shots here of a place that's really kind of hauntingly beautiful today, but is absolutely just, I wonder if it's haunted. You know, I bet you it is. Look at places like that where people were held like cattle, like property. Look at all the fishing boats, though. That's so cool. Really eerie, isn't it? The cell there. Ugh, I can't imagine the human misery that must have occurred in places like this. But yeah, that is the castle. The fort should be nearby. Let's see. I think that's Fort William, right? Let's find it. Oh no, it's Fort Victoria. I think Fort William's over in Elmina then. Fort Victoria is nearby, and this was, of course, to defend the city from any invaders, because as you've heard in history, it happened pretty often, people wanting to control the gold trade here, and then eventually the slave trade. But gold is what put, oh, very fancy, was what put Ghana on the map. Ghana is named after the Kingdom of Ghana, which did not exist in this corner of Africa. It was a bit farther north, up toward Mali. Oh, he's got a cannonball. Be careful, those are heavy. But the Kingdom of Ghana was very famous for its gold reserves. There's London Bridge. I think it's just named that. Oops. Come on. There we go. It's London Bridge, you guys. So when this place became independent, they didn't want to call themselves Gold Coast, not like their neighbors, Ivory Coast, which kept their colonial name, Côte d'Ivoire. So they picked a very African name of Ghana, because the country of Ghana is rich in gold, and the kingdom of Ghana was rich in gold. Apparently that's a nice little spot to take photos. Let me see. There's a market here that's very traditional. I think it's over here somewhere. That's been around since before the city. It was at that marketplace, but the pictures there weren't that great. I don't know if I'm gonna find it, but it's around here. There's also a very huge theater festival that happens in this town. It came up every single source that I read about it, so very important. And there's also lots of like indigenous festivals and traditional, like, I guess like parties, I don't know, I guess festivals of the original inhabitants of this town that still exist. All of their like traditional I don't know what I'm trying to say, traditional festivals. Let's look at Elmina. Here's Elmina Castle. Fort St. Iago is their fort. Well, then where's Fort William? We saw it on the UNESCO. But yes, here's Elmina Castle. The first European, oh, that's ominous, isn't it? The first European structure in Africa, I want to say. That wasn't like ancient Europe, like Romans and such. Modern Europe. It was the 1400s, but still. Male slave dungeon. Oh gosh, that's so ominous. That makes me feel yucky. It's like, as much as I want to tour this place because it's a UNESCO site and has so much history and so important to world history, gosh, I bet you it's like creepily haunted. I bet you it'll give me the willies. Ugh, such a dark history in these places. But then here is the fort defending Elmina Castle. Fort Saint Iago, Fort Santiago de Mina. Obviously Portuguese. It's a big old fort. There's the castle. There's all the fishing boats, which actually I think that's cooler to look at than this old fort, because we just looked at an old fort. Look at all this down here. Look at this fish market, and look at all of these fishing boats. They're like toothpicks. Look at that. Isn't that incredible? What an aerial shot of all these fishing boats, just absolutely loaded up with fresh catches of the day. People making their livelihoods off of it. All down this river, up into this marshy area here. You can see some aqua farms, fish farms, maybe some salt flats. Isn't that incredible? What an aerial shot. Look at it from above. It looks like teeth along this harbor. That's really amazing. What a cool shot, I think. Oh. The Elmina Java Museum. I think I looked at this. Dedicated to the history of the... Oh, that's right. Soldiers that were sent to Java to fight in, I guess, various wars. I'm not sure which war that would have been. The Elmina Java Museum. Yeah, so it's like a veterans memorial. That's right. I remember. Pretty cool. Very important place. Let's look at the national park. There it is. And see how green and lush it is throughout the rest of the area. It's pure. It's actually a rainforest here. And in little communities throughout. But here is Kakum National Park. Apparently very famous for this rope walkway, which absolutely terrifies me. I don't think I could do it. I was reading reviews. Yeah, it says I survived. It said, like, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, if you're afraid of heights, don't do it. And I'm one of those people, so I will not be doing that. Look at all the bamboo. Wow. A big tree here. Tree house up here, too. I don't know how I'd feel about a tree house, as long as it's solid under my feet. Really cool little shop here. Some handmade crafts. Look that way to the rope bridge of doom. Safety tips. There's some bongos. Of course, there's lots of beautiful wildlife here. There's a big elephant. You survived. Hand over your badge here. Goodbye. Yeah, I don't know if I would survive mentally. Physically, I'd be fine, but mentally, I think I'd be not okay. But you can see here that we head over to put the borders back up so you can see. To just the outskirts of Accra. I think when I was filming the Accra video, I was like, we gotta be careful because there's like no like distinguished line between one region and the other. So yeah, here's definitely the outskirts of the capital city. And then we head out to the coast here. And there are other castles and forts and things. I think I found one more, but I don't remember where. Maybe I just dreamed it. Sir Charles Beach. Let's take a look. Oh, there's a protected area. Maybe that is slideshows. I didn't see that. Beautiful beach here. Ooh, splash splash. That would be me. Be much more interested in coming here than a scary rope bridge in the trees. You gotta be kidding me. That sounds awful. I know for some of you, you'd be all about it, but that is not me. Some of you would not be about this. I know my bestie isn't. I took her swimming in the ocean one time and she thought I was crazy. She's like, but it's cold. I'm like, yeah, but it's the ocean. You're swimming in it. It's awesome. Rocks. She's like, there's sharks out there. I'm like, even better. Cool. Let's see this protected area. How cool is that? Little water birds, big water birds, palm trees there growing in the swamp. We got more fishing boats. They're casting their nets out to get some fishies. Carrying some water maybe, or maybe fishies. Beautiful water bird there. Little twisty trees. Oh, he's climbing the tree to get some coconuts maybe. Shimmying up. That's pretty neat. Alright, let's do one more picture. Do you think any of these coves have photos? I remember going through them and I didn't see any. Maybe up here more. Maybe if we go to Fosso up here. I didn't look at Fosso because usually these out of the place towns don't really have that many photos or any like interesting photos. Yeah, it's like pictures of like the hotel pool, you know. Like, I'm trying to show you guys history, not the road. Let's see. Surely we can find one more slideshow to end the video on. We could find something. Let's look at this market in Riverside. Oh gosh, it says slave market in Riverside. What's it say? First bath of return. Oh my goodness. Wonder if maybe people come back to where their ancestors were taken and they can come to the ancestral river. That's amazing. It's bath of return. To wash in the waters of your ancestors again. How wonderful. Ancestral graveyard. This is fantastic. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. Here's a memorial wall. My goodness. Oh my gosh, how awful. Never again. Yes. If you liked this Google Earth segment, tomorrow's episode will be only Google Earth. We're going to Papua New Guinea. Oh gosh, let's not look at that. Nope. Nothing graphic, please. Papua New Guinea, where there's a lot of more beauty like this, but it's very remote, so there's not a lot of pictures. So we're going to try to find some together. So that'll be tomorrow's video, so be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. Please don't forget to give a thumbs up and let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I hope you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good